My name is Mark Hensley, and the first time I understood that I was no longer family, it happened in the parking lot of my own job. It was a Thursday, gray sky, sleet that couldn't decide if it wanted to be rain or snow, the kind that turns asphalt into a mirror. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the plant, and my boots were still damp from the spill in Bay 3 when I saw my truck. The windows were fogged from inside. Not from weather, from breath. I slowed down. Not because I was afraid. Because when you've worked security and compliance for 20 years, you learn to slow down when something isn't where it's supposed to be. The driver's side door opened, and my stepson, Dylan, stepped out like he belonged there. He was 29, tall, broad in the shoulders in a way that made people assume he was capable. His hair was always neat. His smile was always ready. The kind of smile that looked friendly until you realized he only used it when there were witnesses. He held my keys up between two fingers and jingled them once. Like a joke. "Hey, Mark," he said. "You weren't answering." I stared at him, then at the keys, then back at him. "Where did you get those?" I asked. Dylan shrugged. "Mom." He said, "Mom," like it settled everything. Behind him, in the passenger seat, my wife Karen sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight forward through the fogged glass. Like if she didn't move, she wouldn't have to choose. I looked at her through the windshield and waited for her eyes to meet mine. They didn't. That was the moment something in me went quiet. Not anger, not heartbreak, something colder. Something that felt like a door closing somewhere deep inside my chest. Because keys mean something to a man my age. Keys are trust. Keys are access. Keys are the difference between being a husband and being a wallet that sometimes talks. I reached out. "Give them to me," I said. Dylan's smile sharpened. "You'll get them back," he said, "when you stop being so dramatic." Then he walked past me, shoulder grazing mine on purpose, and climbed into my truck like it was his. Karen didn't move. Dylan started the engine. The headlights washed over my boots. And they drove away. My truck. My keys. My wife in the passenger seat. And me standing alone in sleet in the parking lot of the place that had paid for their entire lifestyle. I didn't shout. I didn't chase them. I didn't call the cops. I just stood there and watched taillights disappear into the gray. Because in my world, the first person who raises their voice loses. And I wasn't going to lose again. Cedar Falls, Iowa isn't a place where people reinvent themselves. It's a place where you become what you've always been, just a little more tired. I'm 58. I've worked at the same manufacturing plant since I was 24. Not because I couldn't leave, because I didn't want to. There's a kind of dignity in staying, in being known, in being the guy who shows up early, keeps his word, and fixes things without needing applause. In my house growing up, the rule was simple. You don't take what isn't yours, and you don't embarrass your family in public. My father was a machinist. My mother worked the lunch line at the middle school. We weren't rich, but we never asked anyone for anything. My dad used to say, "A man's name is his bond." Not in a dramatic way, just like it was a fact. I tried to live like that. When my first marriage ended, I didn't blame my ex-wife, even though I could have. We were young. We wanted different things. She wanted movement. I wanted stability. We parted like adults. No screaming. No revenge. No social media war. Just paperwork and a quiet handshake across a lawyer's desk. I didn't have kids of my own. Not because I didn't want them. Because it didn't happen. By the time I accepted that, I was already in my 40s, and the idea of starting over felt like trying to build a house in winter. Then I met Karen. She was warm. Funny. The kind of person who touched your arm when she laughed. She was divorced with one son, Dylan, then 19. Karen worked part-time at a dental office. She had a softness about her that made you want to protect her, and a kind of nervousness underneath it that made you want to stabilize her. When we got married, I didn't go into it blind. I knew what it meant to marry into a family. I knew I wasn't going to be dad. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. Dylan had a biological father somewhere down in Missouri who sent birthday texts and occasional excuses. That was fine. I didn't need to be a hero. I just wanted to be a husband. And, stupidly, I wanted to be useful. It starts like that for a lot of men like me. Not love at first sight. Love through building, through paying, through solving, through saying yes when you should have said, "No, that's not my responsibility." The first year, it was small things. Dylan needed tires. Karen asked if I could help. Just this once. Dylan needed tuition for community college. Karen asked if I could cover it, just for a semester. Dylan wanted a used truck. Karen said it would help him become independent. I paid. I paid because I believed in investment. In family. in the idea that if you showed up enough times, eventually you'd be seen as someone who belonged. And for a while, it felt like it was working. Dylan would call me Mark in front of people, but he'd let me fix his breaks. He'd eat dinner at our table. He'd laugh at my jokes sometimes. Karen would squeeze my hand on the couch and tell me she was grateful. "You're the steady one," she'd say. I didn't realize steady was another word for available. At the plant, my job was head of facility compliance. That meant I lived inside rules. OSHA, safety audits, incident reporting, HR coordination. I wasn't a cop. I wasn't a snitch. I was the guy who made sure people went home with all their fingers. People respected that. They came to me when they needed something solved quietly. And I was good at it because I had a gift for seeing patterns, for noticing what didn't match. So when my own life started not matching, I noticed. It wasn't one big betrayal at first. It was a chain of small ones. Karen started making decisions without telling me. Not huge ones, just little shifts. A dinner we were hosting that she planned without asking. A bill she handled that I later found unpaid. Dylan borrowing tools from my garage and returning them broken, and Karen saying, "Don't make a big deal." Dylan started showing up more. Not with warmth, with need. He'd sit in my recliner like it was his, scroll on his phone, and talk about how the world was rigged, how bosses were idiots, how people didn't appreciate him. He'd say things like, "Some people get handed everything," while sitting in the house I paid for. Then Karen's ex, Dylan's father, started reappearing like a bad penny. His name was Scott, and he had that loud confidence some men use as camouflage. He'd show up on holidays with a six-pack and a grin and act like he owned the place. I didn't love it, but I tolerated it. Because that's what steady men do. They tolerate. And then one day, the tolerating turned into something else. It was the day Karen's mother's estate came up. Her mother had passed in late October. Sweet woman. Quiet. She had a small house, paid off, and a modest savings account. Nothing life-changing, but enough to bring out people's true faces. Karen cried for a week. Then she stopped. The grief turned into planning. Meetings, phone calls, paperwork. Dylan suddenly became very interested in helping. He offered to handle the probate stuff. He said he'd talk to the lawyer. He told Karen, "You shouldn't have to do this alone, Mom." Then, one night after dinner, I walked into the kitchen and saw Dylan at our table with my laptop open. My laptop. Not his. Not Karen's. He clicked something closed quickly. "What are you doing?" I asked. Dylan looked up, unbothered. "Mom asked me to check something," he said. Karen stood at the sink with her back to me, washing a plate that was already clean. I waited for her to turn around and explain. She didn't. She just said, lightly, like she was talking about weather, "It's fine, Mark. He's helping." Helping. In my house, you don't help by going through someone's laptop. I felt that quiet door close again, just a little. Thanksgiving came. We hosted. Karen insisted. Scott showed up. Dylan arrived late, swaggering in like a man with an audience. And when we sat down to eat, Karen placed Scott at the head of the table. My seat. Not the head like a king. The head like the host. Like the man who carved the turkey, who paid the mortgage, who kept the lights on. Scott sat down, patted the table with both hands, and said, "Now this feels right." Dylan laughed. Karen smiled nervously. I stood there holding the carving knife, watching my own place get assigned to someone else like I was a guest. Karen glanced at me. Her eyes said, "Please, don't." So I didn't. I sat at the side, like furniture that had been moved for convenience. That night, after everyone left, I asked her calmly, "Why did you do that?" Karen stared at the sink and said, "It's just one dinner, Mark." I said, "It wasn't just dinner. It was you choosing." Karen's shoulders stiffened. "I didn't choose," she said. And that's when I realized the truth. For her, not choosing was the same as choosing Dylan. Because not choosing meant I would absorb it. Steady men always do. Christmas brought the breaking point. Not because of presents. Because of paperwork. The week before Christmas, my credit monitoring app pinged me during a safety walkthrough at the plant. Change detected. New inquiry. I froze mid-step while forklifts beeped behind me. New inquiry meant someone had pulled my credit. I hadn't applied for anything. I called the bureau on my lunch break. They told me the inquiry came from a local dealership. A truck dealership. I didn't own a new truck. But Dylan had been talking about upgrading lately. I drove home that night with a knot in my stomach and found Dylan in my garage, leaning over my toolbox, texting. I said, "Did you apply for something in my name?" He didn't even look up. "Why would I do that?" he said, like I was ridiculous. Karen walked in behind me, arms full of laundry. She paused when she saw my face. "What's going on?" she asked. I told her about the credit inquiry. Her eyes flicked to Dylan. Dylan's jaw tightened. "Just a fraction." Then Karen said, "Too fast. It's probably an error." I said, "Errors don't happen from truck dealerships." Dylan finally looked up. "You're paranoid," he said. "Jesus." And Karen, my wife, sighed like I was the problem. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Karen's breathing and thinking about all the ways a person can steal from you without taking cash. Time, respect, identity. At 2 in the morning, I got up, went to my office, and opened the metal file cabinet where I kept my important documents. Deed, insurance, tax returns, social security card in a locked pouch. Old habit. The pouch was still there. The social security card was not. I sat back in my chair slowly. Because in my world, that doesn't go missing. Not unless someone you trust has taken it. Christmas Eve was the parking lot. Dylan and Karen took my keys and my truck. The reason came later, like poison that waits to spread. At Casey's gas station, I bought coffee and sat by the window and watched cars move through sleet. I didn't call anyone. I didn't blow up. I didn't text paragraphs. I waited. Because waiting makes people reveal themselves. At 6:12 p.m., my phone lit up. "Karen." I let it ring. "Dylan." I let it ring. Unknown number. I answered that one. "Mr. Hensley," a professional voice said. Woman, mid-40s, calm. "This is Stephanie with Cedar Valley Bank. I'm calling regarding an urgent matter on an account where you are listed as a co-signer." My throat went dry. "Co-signer." I repeated. "Yes," she said. "There's a delinquency notice on an auto loan. A 2023 Ford F-150. The primary borrower has missed 2 payments. And because your name is attached." My hand tightened on the phone. "I didn't co-sign anything," I said. There was a pause, the kind trained people use when they've heard this before. "The file includes a signature attributed to you," she said gently. "If you believe it's fraudulent, we have procedures." Procedures. That word landed like a bell. Because procedures don't care about family politics. Procedures don't get guilt-tripped. Procedures don't fold. "How much?" I asked. 32,000, she said. Balance remaining. The loan was opened 7 months ago. 7 months. That meant it started around the time Karen's mother died. Around the time Dylan got helpful. Around the time my laptop was on the kitchen table. Stephanie continued. "The primary borrower called earlier today. He stated you handle the family finances and would take care of it." Take care of it. Like I was a subscription service. I ended the call politely. I didn't scream at Stephanie. It wasn't her fault. Then I sat in my booth at Casey's and stared at the dark glass and felt something inside me settle. Not rage. Decision. Because here's what Dylan didn't understand. He thought he'd stolen money. He'd actually stolen my name. And my name was the only thing I protected for 58 years. I drove to my old house. The one I'd kept after the marriage, rented out for a while, then left empty as a backup. Karen never liked that I kept it. She called it your escape plan. Maybe it was. Inside, it smelled like dust and pine cleaner. Honest silence. I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. In my job, when an incident happens, you don't jump to emotion. You document. You timeline. You preserve evidence. So I did it. Christmas Eve. Keys taken, truck taken. Credit inquiry, truck dealership. Missing social security card. Auto loan opened 7 months ago. Co-signer signature, allegedly me. I wrote it all down, neat block letters. Then I checked my phone. 31 missed calls. And 1 text from Dylan. "Fix it." They froze my account. "You always fix things." I stared at that sentence until my vision blurred. You always fix things. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I didn't mean." Just the expectation. I didn't reply. At 7:05 a.m. Christmas morning, I walked into Cedar Valley Bank. They opened at 9, but Stephanie met me because I told her it was fraud and urgent. The lobby smelled like carpet and stale peppermint. Stephanie led me into a small office and slid a folder across the desk. There it was, the loan application. Primary borrower, Dylan Parker. Co-signer, Mark Hensley. Signature at the bottom, Mark Hensley. It looked close enough that it would fool someone who didn't know me. But I knew my signature like I know the sound of my own steps. It wasn't mine. Stephanie asked gently, "Is that your signature?" "No," I said. "Then we can start a fraud investigation," she said. "But I need you to understand something. If we do that, the bank will notify authorities. It can have legal consequences for the borrower." Legal consequences. That's the line people like Dylan assume you'll never cross, because family is supposed to be above the law. But family shouldn't be above basic decency. I looked at the form again. Then I thought about Thanksgiving, Scott in my seat, Karen not choosing. About my social security card missing like it was a household item. About Dylan jingling my keys. I signed the fraud statement. My hand didn't shake. Stephanie nodded once, professional and not unkind. Someone will contact you, she said. I walked out into the cold with a stamped copy in my jacket pocket like a death certificate for the life I thought I had. The call started immediately. Karen. Dylan. Karen. Scott, somehow. I didn't answer until I was parked in front of Karen's house. Our house. I walked in without knocking because my key still worked, at least for now. The living room smelled like cinnamon and denial. Karen stood by the tree, eyes red. Dylan paced like a caged animal. Scott sat on the couch like a judge. Dylan snapped the moment he saw me. What did you do? He barked. They froze everything. I took off my coat slowly. I said, why is my name on your truck? Karen flinched. Dylan opened his mouth, then shut it. Scott leaned forward. Now hold on, he said. This is family business. I looked at him. You don't live here, I said calmly. You don't pay anything here. This isn't your conversation. Scott's face hardened. Karen whispered, Mark, please. Her tone was soft, smoothing, like gravy on hardwood. I turned to her. Did you give him my social security card? I asked. Karen's lips parted. She didn't answer. Dylan scoffed. Oh my God, are you serious? You're acting like we robbed you. I said, you did. Dylan's voice rose. It was temporary. I needed the truck for work. For what work? I asked. Silence. Because Dylan had work the way a gambler has a system. Karen stepped forward, hands trembling. I signed for him, she said quickly, like confession could rewind time. I thought it was fine. He said you'd say yes if you understood. And you were stressed and you forged my signature. I finished. Karen's eyes filled. I didn't think they'd treat it like a crime, she whispered. I looked at her and felt something awful and clean. Pity. Because she truly believed the world would bend because she asked nicely. Dylan spat. You're making Mom a criminal. I said, I told the truth. Dylan stepped toward me, chest heaving. You don't do this to family. I held his gaze. You shoved me out of my own truck, I said. You stole my identity. You used my name like it was yours. You decided I'm not family when it's convenient. Scott stood up too fast. You're ruining Christmas. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. You ruined it 7 months ago, I said. You're just hearing about it now. Karen reached for my sleeve, desperate. Mark, please. We can make payments. We can fix it. That word again. Fix. As if my job in life was to clean up messes other people feel entitled to make. I stepped back. I said no. Karen blinked like she didn't recognize me. Dylan's face twisted into something ugly. Then get out. The fraud department called me. The detective assigned to financial crimes called me. I provided handwriting samples. Old forms. Tax returns. My normal signature next to the forged one. It wasn't close. Every conversation was calm. Procedural. Professional. And every conversation tightened the noose Dylan had tied himself with. Karen left voicemail after voicemail. Crying. Apologizing. Promising therapy. Promising payments. Promising. Like promises hadn't been the currency she spent to keep me quiet for years. Dylan's voicemails shifted like weather. First angry. Fix it. Then bargaining. I'll pay you back. Then panicked. They said felony. Then small. Please. The word please out of Dylan's mouth sounded like a tool he'd never used before. Scott called once and left a message that made me laugh without humor. Man to man, he said. You're being petty. Petty. A grown man forging someone's identity for $32,000 and calling the victim petty. I saved every voicemail. Every text. In compliance, we call that preservation. At the plant, I kept doing my job. Because men like me don't fall apart in public. We compartmentalize until it becomes a skill we can't turn off. But my coworkers noticed something. Not that I looked sad. That I looked finished. Like someone who stopped negotiating with reality. One of the guys in maintenance, old buddy named Ron, asked me in the break room, "You good, Mark?" I said, "I'm clear." He nodded like he understood exactly what that meant. Clear is what happens when denial dies. The hearing came in late January. Not a dramatic trial. Just a county pretrial hearing for identity theft and fraud investigation related to the loan. Iowa doesn't play with signatures. Banks don't play with liabilities. and Dylan had created a paper trail that couldn't be smoothed away. Karen sat in the courthouse hallway with a tissue in her hand, eyes swollen. Dylan sat next to her, leg bouncing, trying to look tough, and failing. Scott wasn't there. Funny how family disappears when consequences show up. When Karen saw me, she stood quickly. "Mark?" She whispered like my name was still a handle she could grab. I stopped a few feet away. "I didn't touch her. I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. I looked at her. "You didn't mean for me to find out," I said. Her face crumpled. Dylan hissed, "Say something. Tell them you changed your mind." I stared at him. Calmly. "I can't change facts," I said. "Only you can." The bailiff called the case. We went inside. The room was smaller than people imagine. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights that make everyone look tired and honest. The judge looked like someone's stern aunt. Silver hair, sharp eyes, no patience for excuses. The prosecutor presented the case. Forged signature, co-signer liability, missing documents, timeline, statements. Dylan's public defender tried to frame it as a family misunderstanding. The judge didn't even blink. "A misunderstanding is forgetting a bill," she said. "This is identity misuse." Then she looked at Karen. "Mrs. Hensley, did you sign your husband's name?" Karen's voice shook. "Yes." The judge's gaze didn't soften. "Did you have his explicit permission?" Karen swallowed. "No." The judge turned to Dylan. "Mr. Parker, did you know the signature was not his?" Dylan opened his mouth. Then he did the thing men like him always do when the room stops protecting them. He blamed someone else. "Mom said he'd be fine with it," Dylan said. "He always helps." The judge cut him off with a raised hand. "This court does not care what you assumed," she said. "It cares what you did." Silence fell like snow. I watched Dylan's face shift. Anger, fear, disbelief, like a man watching his usual tricks fail. The judge continued. "Mr. Hensley, do you wish to add anything?" I stood. My hip hadn't fully healed since Christmas Eve. It still ached when I stood too long. A reminder. I didn't give a speech. I didn't insult anyone. I said, "I did not sign that loan. I did not give permission. I asked them to stop using my name. They didn't. That's all." The judge nodded once, as if relieved someone in the room understood simplicity. She set conditions. Repayment plan would be structured, accounts would be frozen, and the criminal case would move forward with options depending on restitution and cooperation. Karen's shoulders shook. Dylan stared at the floor like it might open. And for the first time, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because they were suffering, because the truth was finally stronger than guilt. The fallout didn't arrive like a single explosion. It arrived like slow weather. Karen moved out for a while, stayed with her sister. She called me every day at first, then every few days, then only when she needed a signature. Irony is cruel. Dylan lost the truck. Of course he did. The dealership took it back. He tried to tell people it was stolen. Hard to claim that when your own text says, "Fix it." At the plant, I changed my direct deposit passwords, froze my credit, closed joint accounts. In my world, you don't leave doors unlocked after someone walks through them. Some people in town found out. Small towns always do. People gave me that look, the one that says I'm sorry, but also I'm glad it's not me. And then, one evening in February, Karen showed up at my old house. Not with tears, with a folder. She stood on my porch, cheeks red from wind, holding the folder like a shield. "I talked to a lawyer," she said. I didn't invite her in right away. I said, "About what?" She swallowed. "About separation. About protection. For you. For me. For everything." I watched her for a long moment. Because part of me wanted to feel vindicated, and another part of me just felt tired. I stepped aside. Inside, she sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd written my timeline. She slid the folder toward me. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," she said quietly. "I'm asking you to stop bleeding because I was too weak to say no to my son." That word, weak, was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in years. She continued, "I always thought keeping the peace was love. I thought you'd absorb things because you're steady. And I let Dylan learn that he could take from you because you wouldn't make it ugly." She looked up, eyes wet but focused. "I made you small in your own life." I didn't respond right away. Because if you answer too fast, you answer from habit, not truth. Finally, I said, "You didn't make me small." She flinched, hopeful. I finished. "You revealed where I stood." Karen nodded like she accepted the distinction. We talked for hours that night. Not about romance. About boundaries. About consequences. About the difference between help and enabling. She admitted she'd given Dylan access to my documents months ago just for the loan, and then panicked when it started going bad, and then doubled down with lies because she couldn't face the fact that she'd betrayed me. I listened, not as her husband, as a man documenting, because love without trust is just habit wearing a wedding ring. Spring came late. It always does in Iowa. In March, Dylan took a plea agreement. No prison time if he completed restitution, financial counseling, and stayed clean. One violation, and it would switch from mercy to punishment. He was furious, of course. Furious at me. Furious at the system. Furious at consequences. He sent me one final text that I still keep saved. "You were never my family anyway." I stared at it, then typed back 2 words. "Correct. Goodbye." And then I blocked him. Some people mistake blocking for weakness. Like you can't handle confrontation. But blocking is a boundary. It's saying, you don't get access to me anymore. It's the adult version of taking your keys back. Karen and I finalized the separation in April. We didn't do a screaming divorce. We did what adults do when the fantasy dies: paperwork. We signed agreements, divided accounts, removed access, drew lines. When she _toggle her pen over the signature line, her hand trembled. Not because she didn't want to sign, because she finally understood what a signature means. Afterwards, she stood outside the courthouse with her arms wrapped around herself. "I'm sorry," she said again, softer. I looked at the sky, pale blue for the first time in months, and said, "I believe you." Her eyes widened, like she thought believing meant returning. I added, "Believing you doesn't mean undoing it." Karen nodded slowly. Tears fell, quiet. Then she walked away. And that was that. People always ask me if it felt like revenge. It didn't. Revenge feels hot. This felt cold. Like finally taking your hand off a stove you kept telling yourself wasn't burning you. I didn't destroy Dylan's life. Dylan destroyed his own stability by deciding my identity was something he could borrow like a power tool. I didn't humiliate Karen. Karen humiliated herself the moment she chose to wipe up messes instead of defend the man who kept the roof over her head. All I did was tell the truth to a system designed to respond to facts. The system did the rest. On Christmas the next year, I sat alone in my old house and ate a simple dinner. Not sad. Quiet. I made coffee the way my dad made it, strong and plain. I put my keys on the table in front of me. My keys. My truck in the driveway, unlocked only for me. My name clean again. My credit repaired. Not because anyone apologized enough. Because I stopped paying for peace with my dignity. Outside, snow started falling, slow and steady, like the world didn't care about my story. And I realized something that took me 58 years to learn. If people only love the version of you that fixes things, they don't love you. They love the benefits. So I stopped being a benefit. I became a person. And that was the most fair ending I could ask for.